Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. We're back for the part two. We want to touch on a few things, but there was a question you wanted to ask me to, introduce this second segment of the conversation. We're talking about right-wing politics. We've been discussing, articulating and exploring the relevancy of race and rape and the criminal justice system and the levers of power and who really controls. We talked about Tommy. And we talked about Katie. I think you had a question about Katie and what was the nature of the question, my brother?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's Mohammed Solomon here. Welcome to Islamic Action TV. Last week, or the last time we spoke, part one, it's been reverberating on my mind since the last time. It's blew me away. It's actually, you put so much stuff, broke it down, dissected it, made it all crystal clear, so we could I clearly understood now the filthy, dirty, gutter agenda of Tommy Robinson and the agenda of Katie Hopkins. I can now see that they're the antithesis to what British people want. They're anti-British, they're anti-freedom of speech, they're anti-democracy, they're anti-everything which the British people in the modern Britain stands for. They're actually everything against it. But they've hoodwinked, bamboozled, ran amok, ran astray and tricked people. So, but we got to a point where we exposed them now. We now know this is what their real agenda is. It's not standard. It's clear. It's clear. However, we then touched on something, and you have to look back at the last video prior to this if you want to get the fullness of it. But we touched on, got to the point of, just before it ended, was on about what is the real nub of the matter, what's really pushing the buttons for these two fascist, racist, ignorant pigs. And I believe it got down to the fact that they're falling numbers. Their birth rate is dropping.
What, in white Western Europe?
White Western Europe. And I believe what I was looking at, and maybe you could add to expand on this, there's something to do with, I'm wondering if it's because of the white female and because of all the feminism around her and Katie Hopkins being this kind of so-called feminist, secular, so-called empowered woman and of the high echelons of society.
Definitely educated,
articulate woman. Is there a reason why the white male of the species of Europeans look at someone like this and find her distasteful? Is there a reason why his sperm count is dropping, the European? Is Katie Hopkins, is there some significant point that we're missing as to what the link between Katie Hopkins is and the declining birth rate in white Western Northern Europe?
When you mentioned that, what made me laugh is I thought about Katie and birth rate. And when I thought about Katie, astaghfirullah, but even in the halal way, I could, there's a lot of brothers that be watching thinking they wouldn't be able to increase the birth rate in that, you get where I'm coming from with Katie.
Back in the
but the truth of the matter is that there's probably a number of reasons why in white Western Europe the birth rate is falling. Allah knows best. We can explore that a little bit. We make some suppositions and hypotheses, but the fact is that there's information to suggest that for a population to sustain themselves culturally, economically, to reproduce themselves, their birth rate needs to be something like 2.11% to regenerate itself. And at the moment, white Western Europe, he's using these terms white and whatever, but we're human beings, but we're talking about race, so I feel free. I'm free for that still, So they're at something like 1.9 or approaching that number, and they said that a population is, some people that study the science of demographics, I don't know if they call them demographers, but the people who study the science of demographics say that that no race has come back from that, no culture has been able to reproduce itself from 1.9, and at 1.3 it's impossible. And so you do know that in certain countries in what we consider white Western Europe now, they're at 1.9 in some places and 1.3 in some places. And the Muslim population is a younger population. They're entering into Europe either by immigration, via birth rate and higher birth rate, and on top of that then you have the asylum seekers as well. So it's looking like, if you look at the trajectory, and the social engineers always look at the trajectory, they don't look at this year, they look at 15, 20, 30, 50, 80 years time, the population is something like due to double in the next 10 to 20 years or something of that nature. So that's a phenomenal rate. And if you look at another population's birth rate as declining, do you understand? Their culture, their actual existence is in the demise. So I feel like that's something that is deeper at play in the psyche. Whether Katie, whether Tommy are just pawns, or whether that's some kind of unconscious drive. But I feel like you can't deny that in the dialogue. But at the same time, if you're saying you're really for democracy, then you've got a lot of explaining to do. Why can't these people be here and marry themselves and have children with themselves and have families? They say things like, talk about places like Blackburn, that it become a ghetto of Muslim and brown and Pakistani people. But at the same time, again, who controls the levers of power in this country? Who the main levers of power? The three major institutions: the judiciary. Do you understand? The judges, the High Court, and the Appeal Court. Who is white? Mostly white men that dominate these institutions. The police force, the executive, the government. The government is made up of mostly white men, white people. Do you understand? The fifth, what do they call it? The fourth estate, the press, the print press. Not just a print press, but the mainstream broadcast press. They're supposed to regulate the three other institutions. The executive, the judiciary, and the legislator, the House of Parliament. It's white people. The city of London, not just London as London, but the city, the financial capital. That one that has its own police force, that has dragons. These gargoyle dragons posted outside. Some kind of spiritual issue spiritual teachings that we could break down at another level. But you know what I mean? All these top institutions or lodges, they're white institutions, dominated by white people. These Rotary club. So how can like a nominal number of Pakistani or people of immigrant descent? How do they set the legislation? I want to know how they do that in Blackburn. How do they set the tone for the whole country? By a few mosques in Luton and stuff like that, and this takeover. This thing about Sharia courts, they're not even Sharia courts. They're little arbitration places. This media that give them the Sharia court thing, they work under. There's nothing that they can implement that is not consistent with the law of England and Wales, for example, or UK law. There's nothing they can implement, nothing binding. Do you understand? In fact, it's not even binding on the people that go there. They go there as because these things would go to civil court or family court, for example, and they're inundated anyway with just the general public. So it's like, this community, right, or these communities of people have tried to set up their own institutions to resolve matters. Yeah? So we're happy for that because it's better that it doesn't even go to court, so you've got your own system. If it was Jehovah's Witness, if it was, the Pentecostal church, the government would treat it the same. They'd be happy, people are not going to court, it's being resolved. So there's a lot going on, but I think the birth rate, I think that the sleight of hand with the levers of power being in white hands, but they're trying to, instead of getting the white working class who's oppressed by that same hidden hand, instead of them focusing their energies on that, it's the brown people, it's the Pakistanis, it's because they don't want to integrate. As I said before in the last video, us as Caribbeans, we tried to integrate and we got pushed back. Do you understand? We got pushed back. Because we're cool like that. I mean, what did the Pentecostal church come out of? It came out of black people going to Anglican and white British churches. They weren't Muslim, innit? When our parents came, they didn't come here with a shahada. They didn't come with Quran in one hand and prayer mat in the other hand and zikr beads. Innit? They came as Christians in a suit and stuff like that, wanting to get. Come in our houses, we used to have a picture. I had to get rid of them pictures. I bought them pictures. but I'm just saying, as kids growing up, as children growing up, we used to have a picture of a white Jesus. That was our savior. That is the psyche of the black people that came here to integrate. But the sign said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. What are you talking about integration? They're lying, man. They're lying. Tommy and Katie are lying. The point of it is that people in Pakistani people, Asian people, Southeast Asian people in this country don't run nothing to say that, they control a council, so they're determining who goes where. Do you understand? This white flight, even in private houses, people move. It means that these people have come to my area. I'm a white working class person, for example. I live in Bradford, I live in wherever, right? And then I saw one brown man, two man, three. Then they start to leave the place. Do you know what I'm trying to say to you? It's them leaving, and then other people coming in, and you saying, wait there, we believe in democracy, rule of law, civil society. These people are bought. Did they steal the house? Did they burn down? What law did they break, or did they purchase? It's a free market system we live in. They purchased the house. If they want to cook what they want to cook, if they want to live how they want to live in their house, I don't understand what law they're breaking or what lack of integration. I don't understand. So anyway, holler at me, man. Holler at you.
I see this. 1,000 things come to my mind when you said that. I think there is a picture that I saw recently a cartoon strip, and there's like the coastline of Europe, and then there's like a European man telling an African who's a sub-Saharan African in the water, we can't trust you coming into our country. And the African saying to him, why not? And he says, because we raped, murdered, killed and pillaged everything to come to your country, so we assume you're going to do the same thing when you come to our country. But the reality is different. When the migrants or immigrants or those who are fleeing a war, that's caused by the same people that Lenin supports, the West, the legislature in this country, when they come to this country, they don't do those things, right? And if they have exaggerated, like the so-called rape of all these German women over a Christmas period by Arab men, which was all a lie. Right? Then that woman, the people who did that, now they're in prison now. The woman for Britain First, I forgot her name, this Dutch woman, and this is what you have to realise. This is a Dutch woman who's come to England and is acting as if she's more British than people like myself, another Caribbean people like you, who being part of the British so-called empire, born in schooled here.
Parents came around.
Yes, and they got British passport. Yes, 400 years, 300 years ago. And you get some Dutch woman whose family come fleeing war and terror, who hooked up with the Nazis, and the British people like my generation, the Wingwolf generation, black people have to go and fight and kill these Nazis. But now she's over here now banging up her mouth about who can stay, who can't stay. This woman's a Dutch woman, and she's a Jew. Make it even worse. She's a Jewish Dutch woman, and she's now saying what she don't like Muslims, but she claims to be Christian because she's got Christians in her family. Right? The same as Tommy. Tommy, 20 years ago, the Irish people, he's an Irishman. They were the ones that were seen as the scum. They were the ones that were seen as all the Muslims are seen now. Because the Catholic Church is all rape and abuse in there. They've closed and wiped out nunneries because of the sexual abuse of the nuns and the priests against women who were unprotected, vulnerable, and sodomy on top of debaucherous behaviour. But now, he's now trying to say, because he's white, and because Katie is white, they seem to think their whiteness, makes them able to comment on things. They're not able to comment on things. Because at the end of the day, they don't represent the true working class British person. And that's the thing that people have to understand. They don't represent that. And I think what's added to the mix though, is when you get hypocrites. Like, what's his name again?
Majid
Nawaz. People like him will come in, a coconut, who now tries to fire up the situation and try and say, Tommy's got a point. The Muslim fifth column. Right? Because the reality is, this is to justify foreign wars and foreign terror. It's standard practice now. And all you working class people who are going to watch this video, this value of it, yes. The point of the matter is, if you don't want terror coming to your country, tell your government, get out of those Muslim countries then, isn't it? Stop supporting Saudi Arabia. Stop overthrowing Iraq. Stop going into Afghanistan. Stop trying to build pipeline in people's country. Stop going there and allowing them to kill and murder other people in their country, like in Syria and these countries, for political and for economic reasons.
It's not economic, my brother.
It's geopolitical.
It's not even.
It's geopolitics. That's what's happening. Yes, and unfortunately, you're the working people. You suffer because you're being ignorant. This is the bottom line of it. So they don't care about you. You're not interested in you at all. They never have been. When they sent you off to the Crimea, when they sent you off to fight in the Victorian times, but yet you were living in slums, that you were living in ghettos.
Kids going up chimneys.
That's your history, Oliver. So you saying free Tommy outside thing, right? He's got the mentality of a 3-year-old. Right? But he is not a leader. He's not but a bleeder and a liar.
The levers of power.
Sure.
But you mentioned an interesting individual called Majid Nawaz. He's a very.
And that other Asian we said about black criminals.
We'll get onto that gentleman in it. But Majid Nawaz, what's interesting about him is that he claims to be a Muslim. I'm not in a position to pronounce him an apostate of Islam, but it seems like he disagrees with so many different verses in the Quran, so many different interpretations of the Quran. He seems to have very little in common with what's classical. Islamic thought, and if I had a chance to speak to him, I want to ask him not what he doesn't believe in and why he likes to put Muslims on the back foot consistently in the mainstream and always trying to get Muslims to apologise, look back, but actually, what is it that he does believe in Islam that makes him a Muslim? The actual opposite. I won't want to call him apostate, but what is it that what makes him a Muslim? What makes him support the plight of the Palestinians who are clearly oppressed by a illegal occupying force, And that's not just according to that's not my words. That's like like when you check the history, you check the UN Charter and things of this nature.
Yeah, let me talk to get up.
Independent international bodies who have said this, international media corporations who have suggested and made documentary, and there's so much footage. So he was once for the plight of the Palestinians. There was a recent march to support the plight of the Palestinians recently, which he in the past spoke on behalf of the Palestinians. Now he's supporting holding the Israeli flag. I don't.
Of the apartheid racist.
I don't think you can take anyone that is a Zionist rent boy serious. He's a Zionist butcher boy. Do you know what butcher boy is? I didn't say. I'm not speaking in Caribbean vernacular. I say butcher boy. Butcher boy. Butcher boy. The Farsi.
Tell me about the butcher boy. Break it down.
The Farsi term. So this is so in countries like Afghanistan, God protect us from the evil of the shaitan. But they have some kind of weird subculture, underground, hidden culture where young boys are paid to dance for older men, and they dress and adorn the makeup and the attire of women and dance in a feminine manner. Check RT News. There's a very interesting documentary about this. And these young boys dance for these older men, corrupt older men, and at the end of the night, the men vie to have an evil way with these unfortunate young people who have been taken advantage of. And I'm saying that on a metaphorical level, Majid represents a Zionist butcher boy where he is dancing and
in on him.
Yeah, he's gyrating on behalf of the Zionist pig, and I make a clear distinction between the honourable people of the Jewish faith and the political system, this actual political system, which many of them don't agree with. They say not in my name. So we make that clear distinction. It has nothing to do with Judaism or anything of that nature. None of the revealed scriptures or anything to do with that. So I don't
Rabbi Weiss and Kachuri Carter, they're against the illegal state of Israel.
The illegal occupation.
So religiously, they're against Zionism.
Religiously,
there is no theological basis for the establishment of the state of Israel, or how the Zionist, racist, fascist apartheids are acting towards the Palestinians. And so when Tommy says he's a Zionist, and Katie claimed they're Zionists, right? And the American
Trump and all
them say
all the right wing people,
all the right wing in America, they're all Zionists, they're all Zionists,
That's really
and Trump even used Britain first his videos to say that.
Very, very interesting.
So that shows you, that the political
and Majid is a Zionist.
Just as Majid said, just as there is a political Hezbollah, and then there is the armed wing of Hezbollah, right? The British government says the political wing is legal. You can fly the flag. No problem. But if you support the armed wing,
it's a prescribed organisation.
So the same as Sinn Féin in Ireland and the IRA. Right. So that's reality of it, isn't it? Right.
But people actually go out when people want to support the independent people of Palestine. This is free Islamic people who are being oppressed, and just adhere to their plight. To say, it's wrong what's going on. It doesn't matter who's doing what to who, but in principle, this is human beings. Just put the theology and the theory aside. This is just wrong, isn't it? Like, kids shouldn't be, what I'm saying? Killed, and this is wrong what's going on. So we want to march and support them.
But why
is there a counter demonstration and people trying to trap you into supporting the prescribed organisation so you can get arrested?
Yeah, that's no point of it. But my point is, the British working class person has been lied to again by Tommy to make people think that the religious Orthodox Jew supports Zionism. They don't, right? They're waiting for their Messiah to come. He cannot return as long as the Zionist state exists. So there's Jews over there, those who wear all the black and hammock and everything. They want to see that state destroyed. Never mind what Iran is saying or what they claim Iran is saying. They want that state to be destroyed. So Tommy never supports the religious Jew. He supports the political armed wing, which is Zionism. That's the armed wing. Right? And that flag that they have.
That should be prescribed.
That's what
the
he supports.
Should be prescribed
that 6-pointed star is a sign of it's the armed wing. It's the same as the Hezbollah's armed wing or any other armed wing. But the Orthodox Jews don't use that 6-pointed star. That was created by Ben Gurion and by Herzog and the Zionist Jews. And that's where you can find a coin minted in Nazi Germany with a swastika on one side, and on the other side you find the so-called Star of David. This was created in the 14th, 15th century by political Jews, that the Rothschilds. That's why they call it the shield of the South. Is the shield. That's why they call the Rothschilds. It's called the Red Shield. So it goes back, and people don't understand that Rothschild owns so-called Israel. He bought so-called Israel from Lord Balfour in the Balfour Declaration. So this is the ignorance that the so-called Britain first.
But Mr. Free Speaking Majid, he can't
No, not that shield, not that Israeli Jewish shield.
He can't go.
Not that red boy, not that Bachelor boy for Israel.
He is a Bachelor boy.
He's a Bachelor boy, yeah.
In a hypnotic trance. He's not to be taken as well. You have to bring it to this level of satire because you can't take a man serious like that.
You can't. No.
You
How can you be for 1 minute one thing, you're this thing, and now you switched? You can never trust a man like that again.
Yeah, and on top of it, again, he's supposed to be Mr. Critical Thinking, Mr. Analysis, but is the left hemisphere of his brain seems shut down when it comes to talking about dealing with, exploring, and analysing the
ex-terrorists. Who's up this now for?
Illegitimate state of Israel.
That's what ex-terrorists.
His inability comes to the fore. But when it comes to understanding Muslim theology and
yes.
Arabic
and
I speak the language and I'm this and I'm that and I once was a member of this organization. He's good at that, though. Yeah, that's his party trick, isn't it?
Yeah, this it's all sleight of hands. Yeah, this is the man that printed offensive cartoons, knowing, he would inflame the Muslims. But he wants to show freedom of speech, the same as Tommy, isn't it? But you cannot say the Holocaust didn't exist. That's the freedom of speech you can't say, right? And the Holocaust only came about in the 1970s. Prior to that, before some agency in New York created this term, advertising agency, nobody used that term.
So
it wasn't used.
We got Madison Avenue.
Madison Avenue came in and created the term and left and dropped it into the community, and people come with that term. An advertising agency was used to sell Israel. Wow.
So we got back to what's it called again? Torches for Freedom. We got back to the knowledge of the Third Reich. We got back to his nephew.
Yeah, we got back to
his nephew Eric.
Edward Bernays,
This is
Crystal Nacht,
manufacturing of consent.
We go back to Chomsky, Noam Chomsky.
I feel like going and picking up my.
They sold and created Israel, and even if you go to the where they claim they gassed the Jews, and I'm not saying that the Nazis didn't do this, so don't try and say
Jews were murdered.
The Jews were murdered. That's
I don't know how many were.
Gays, Jews, British people were murdered by the Nazis.
Undesirables.
Yes, it's undesirable. No excuse for that. However, the so-called gas chambers were built in the 50s, the late 40s and 50s by the Poles. They didn't exist at the time of the war. They weren't there. And he said, there's a plaque on the wall that says it. Reconstructed. Right? So, we don't got no reconstructed slave castles in Ghana. They were there when they shipped us out. There's no reconstructed slave castles in where is it again? Senegal. No. Yeah, like, made, you know what I mean? Made after the slavery. Just to show what it was like. They're there. Right? They don't, so the point of the matter is, what can you question? So Majid, he is a provocateur, agent provocateur. Yes, and he's a Lord Haw again, like Lennon and like Hopkins.
Casey.
Yeah, that's what they are. The agent provocateurs. They're not for freedom of speech. Because if you phone in his show and go talk about Israel, you see how quickly freedom of speech gets dashed out the window. Because you cannot talk about it. Whether it's O'Brien, any of them. You cannot talk or criticize Israel. In America, they've actually made it illegal to criticize Israel. Every senator in America is paid and bought. Right? The reality is that it's, as the brother said, the legislature, right? Who controls the legislature? The executive branch. Who controls the judiciary? Who controls the media?
The fourth estate.
That's
what we're talking about, man.
Who controls it? Yeah, Muslims. Yeah, them Asian man with their red teeth driving around in the little cab. In their cabs and the Islamic... Despicable though they are, evil though they are, to be abusing all type of girls. As the brother said, look at the system they're in. This would not happen if the system, the government itself, or the branches of the government or the authorities did not turn their eyes to what was happening. Because they're doing their own nastiness equally. That's the point.
Up to the Westminster scandal though, twice it's been derailed.
Yeah, Lord Britain was involved in that. What happened to that?
Inquiry.
Cyril Smith. All these top politicians was involved.
Yeah.
But they were all bachelor boys that they had.
It's gone quiet now.
It's gone quiet, yeah.
It's gone quiet though.
Going to homes and taking little boys out and grooming them. The police claimed they could never release the statistics of the level of paedophilia in this country. Nothing to do with Asians, nothing to do with, but because of white pedophilia, white levels, right? They claim it's endemic. Just as racism was seen as institutionalized, pedophilia and child abuse is institutionalized in this society.
Wow.
And they can never let you know the true records. There was a police officer that said that because it would destroy the British government. It would destroy this very system.
Credibility will be under.
So they have to give you these red herrings like war in Iraq and war in Syria and the war here and the war there and the war there.
And then halal meat scared.
And halal meat scared. They need a bogeyman.
A niqab scared. A gang.
And trick you.
A Muslim scared. A Muslim.
But ask yourself, Mr. Outrage, Europe skinhead supporter of Tommy Innit, why is it record levels of your little white girls who you care so much about are being abused at home in the same white families and being put into care? Or being sexually abused or on alcoholism or drugs or born with deformities because of the behaviour of their white mothers in places like Newcastle and all these places and Blackburn. Why so many white girls in care? What society are you producing even if all the Asians left? And there was no abuse. The abuse starts with the system. The abuse starts in the house. You don't seem to care about them, do you? You only care since some Asian man put his grubby hands on them, innit?
That's mad, you know. That is
but prior to that, nobody cares about these same girls. You see them begging on the street, you walk past them, innit? The same girl who's been abused, you see her begging on the street with a little three-legged dog, right? Jumping up and down with a little sign saying, feed me, and you walk past her. Because
remember, in the 70s, isn't the British sex industry made up of girls like that? This is before any Rotherham kind of skit. Yeah. You know, as when you was growing up as a kid and stuff like that, and they used to talk about these programs, I don't know, like Weekend World and they used to bring these programs and say like how many girls from the country. This was when there was no Muslim, Asian, Sikh, Hindu, Vishnu, any of that stuff. Yeah,
Anglo-Saxon.
It was just Britain was known as more white. Yeah, and these girls that were used to get molested in whatever situation, whether it's in schools, in their family homes, in their religious institutions, but they been tampered with. They weren't getting the psychological intervention, the mental health intervention as a coping mechanism. They would come to London thinking that they would seek their fame and fortune, and there were pimps that were there to groom them and bring them into the sex game. That's where so many women in the adult industry come from. Do you understand? It's nothing. So it's a smokescreen. There's a lot deeper going on, but we're gonna drill this home as we finish out. Check out the 4 institutions. Who runs those 4 main institutions that determine social, economic, legislative, and political policy in this country? And when you can convince me that it's some, as you said, man with red beard from Bradford and them kind of places who don't even speak English good, yeah? And that's not no slight on Pakistani Muslim brothers that are cool and the sisters that are cool and that, you know? But I'm just saying, like, you're making out these people can't even speak English, they don't socialise, they don't integrate, and you're saying they really set the policy, or something else is going on. But we smell bacon, homie! We smell bacon, man. But it's been a pleasure, and this is a moment that I will treasure because this was Truth Hour. Don't touch that dial. We'll be back next time. But remember to subscribe on the left and the right. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah ta'ala.